know my moves like my ABC.
We need a decent definition of what a social justice warrior is. We have problems with this definition. We even have people thinking it's a good thing, and so that kind of needs to be addressed. So to start with, what's social justice? Well, social justice, at least according to the Oxford English Dictionary, is justice in terms of the distribution of wealth, opportunities and privileges within a society. Now, while there's people that would object to this, there's people who will object to anything. In principle, there's nothing wrong with any of these, though privilege as a term has been so utterly abused that it has become virtually meaningless. I'm going to assume here that the word privilege means the actual definition of the word privilege, that being a special right, advantage or immunity granted or available only to a particular person or group. For example, the police are given privilege to enforce the law. Royalty has privilege. Wealth can buy privilege in our society. So that's a privilege, something over and above the expected societal norm, not the absence of a disadvantage. Now, personally, I have no objection to social justice defined this way. I believe in the value of a free society, of equal opportunity. I think the wealth gap needs to be addressed with some urgency. I'm against racism, sexism, and everything else that the social justice warriors bang on about. So given that, how could I possibly be against them? Well, the important thing to remember here is that the word warrior is appended. That word adds an extremist element to the mix. And Urban Dictionary's current top-voted description of a social justice warrior combines elements of this extremism, of faking it, and of being a keyboard warrior. Now, personally, I think this is a little outdated. I think social justice warriors are usually honest in that this is really what they believe. I don't think that most of them are faking it. There's definitely some fakes out there, but no, I think they're all the more scary for the fact that they're not faking it. I think it's the extremism that's the part that needs to be concentrated on. If you want an analogy, you could compare social justice and social justice warrior to the different impressions that the words, say, Muslim and Islamist might have. That conveys some of the difference between the two, the level of extremism. Though all analogies are imperfect, other options might be to compare, say, the socialist Fabian Society and the Weather Underground. This is all deliberate hyperbole, but it does help make the point. This is what the warrior part adds to it, the extremism. A social justice warrior wants to force their particular vision of progress on everyone else. While someone fighting for social justice might fight for the equality of the races, a social justice warrior will attack white people, or anyone else they deem to be somehow broadly in a position of dominance, regardless of their actual personal circumstances. So they end up not fighting for equality, they end up fighting against white people, at least when it comes to race, men when it comes to gender, and so it goes. Where someone fighting for social justice might advocate for equality of the sexes, a social justice warrior will attack and demonize men and blame them for every problem in the world and create issues that don't exist, like rape culture. Where someone concerned about social justice might actually work to understand and solve issues of violence or rape in our society, a social justice warrior will create a moral panic and try to censor art, television, comics and games in the mistaken belief that this is related to these problems. A normal person who doesn't like such a media depiction will avoid it. A social justice warrior will explicitly or implicitly require it to be banned. A normal person who doesn't like the attitude of a company representative might avoid that company or that representative. A social justice warrior will enact a boycott of the company and demand that that rep be fired. And companies, often caught on the back foot, afraid of this great mob of howling digital torch wielders at their gate, might just well go along with it. A social justice warrior, then, is everything that they claim to be fighting against. They're often disgustingly racist, just against acceptable targets, whites or anyone of any race who happens to disagree with them, calling them house niggers, for example. They're usually disgustingly sexist, just sexist against men, and any women who disagree with them. They will decry censorship out of one side of their mouth while encouraging and indulging it and giving license to governments to enact it, usually under spurious claims of harm, out of the other side of their mouth. Much of the opposition to social justice warriors comes from people who you might term actual justice activists, people who believe in the same or similar things that the SJWs profess to believe in, but who actually mean it, and do not make exceptions or indulge in special pleading to excuse their own bullying and prejudice. Indeed, I suspect this, the bullying and prejudice, is actually why many social justice warriors do it. Many of them are horribly aggressive, nasty people who have long been aggressive and nasty even before they joined their causes. In attaching themselves to social justice, they're delivered up an array of acceptable targets on a platter, people and positions that they can attack without anyone giving them much of a hard time over it. If you think being called a social justice warrior is a good thing, you're an idiot, and no amount of jokes like social justice cleric can mask the point that SJWs are horrible people, hypocrites and extremists who are now presenting a genuine threat to useful and reliable media, to useful and reliable education, and to the act of making art. It's going to be a very long slog getting those things back to a position of freedom and to actual justice. And that, perhaps, is the ultimate irony, that people who style themselves as progressive have rolled back hard-won freedoms that we've fought and bled for since the 60s, and taken them back to a position where we're into genuine threat of no longer having them. A social justice warrior, then, is an extremist and a hypocrite and an authoritarian. And that's what we need to understand by the term social justice warrior. You can keep up with what I'm doing at postmortemstudios.wordpress.com, which also has links to everywhere that I sell my products. You can also keep up with me on Twitter at Grimachew, and if you would care to support my work, you can support me at Patreon, again at Grimachew. Anything you give there will be used to better future further projects. Thanks.